My name is Mike, and this happened last year, not long after my fiance and I bought our first starter home together. We're an Asian couple, and that matters to the story. It was a small two-story house in a plain suburban town in Georgia. Nothing fancy, nothing special, in the way people usually mean it. But to us, it was supposed to be. Quiet street, a decent little backyard, a cheap fence, and the same regular-looking houses lined up side by side. We still couldn't believe we even managed to buy a place at our age. It felt like a turning point for us, like the beginning of our life together. And then it got taken from us in a way I didn't understand until it was too late. The first few days were completely normal. We unpacked boxes, made a couple trips to Target, and met a few neighbors as we tried to settle into our routine. The couple on our right were older and friendly. The guy across the street waved and even walked over once to introduce himself when he saw us outside. Everything felt safe, but the house on our left didn't match that feeling. We didn't see anyone come out of it for the first several days. The curtains stayed shut all the time. The place looked clean and normal, no junk in the yard, no broken windows, nothing that screamed problem, but it always felt dim inside, like the lights never came on. The part that bothered me was that there was a car parked in the driveway, like someone clearly lived there. Still, it looked like a house that was always empty. The first time we noticed anything at all, it was one afternoon when my fiance and I were carrying groceries in from our car. She leaned in and quietly said something like, "Look." I followed her eyes to the front window of the house next door. Behind the curtain, a man was standing there, not fully out in the open, more like half hidden, but there was no doubt what he was doing. He was watching us. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just stared, like we were something he was studying. The second he realized we'd noticed him, he stepped away from the window and disappeared into the dark of the house. It was strange, but we brushed it off. Some people are private, some people are awkward. Maybe he didn't like meeting new neighbors. We told ourselves whatever made it feel less creepy. Over the next week, though, it kept happening. Not outside, always inside. I'd catch him in his living room window, sometimes when I left for work in the morning. My fiance said she saw him upstairs once when she went to grab the mail. Every time we noticed him, it was the same thing. He'd be positioned where he could see us, and the moment we looked back, he'd move away like he didn't want to be caught doing it. It started to feel less like coincidence and more like a habit. Then, one night, something happened that pushed it into a kind of unease we couldn't ignore. It was around midnight. I was upstairs getting ready for bed, lights mostly off, just moving through the room on autopilot. Our bedroom window faced directly toward his house, so as I walked past it, I glanced out without really thinking. And there he was, upstairs in his own window. But this time, he wasn't partially hidden behind a curtain. He wasn't peeking. He was fully visible, standing upright, facing straight toward our bedroom, like he'd been waiting for that exact moment. I stopped mid-step. For a second, I honestly wondered if my eyes were playing tricks on me, but the way he was positioned, it was too deliberate. Then, the instant he realized I'd seen him, he stepped back out of view. I let out this uncomfortable laugh and said to my fiance something along the lines of, "Awesome, our neighbor's a creep." The next morning, he came to our front door. That was the first time we ever saw him outside his house. He knocked like a normal person, polite and casual, and introduced himself as Gordon. He apologized for how it might have looked the night before. He said he'd been putting something on his window ledge and didn't mean to look into our room. He smiled the whole time. It wasn't a snarl or anything obviously hostile. It was a friendly-looking smile, the kind that's supposed to put you at ease. And it did, at least a little. I'm not saying I instantly liked him. Even standing there in the daylight, something about him still felt off, like he was performing nice. But an apology is an apology, and I didn't want to turn it into a bigger issue, so I told him it was fine. After he left, I told my fiance he seemed kind of friendly, but still weird. We agreed to let it go. A week later, we couldn't let it go anymore. One night, in the middle of sleeping, my fiance shook me awake. She sounded tense and quiet, like she was trying not to panic, and told me she thought she heard someone outside in the yard. I was still half asleep, but I got up anyway and went to the window. You know how it is. Your brain flips into that I have to check mode even if you don't want to. When I looked out, I saw someone in our backyard. Not an animal, not a shadow or tree branch moving. A person. A grown man walking around like he was searching for something, moving slowly through the yard. My first instinct was stupid. I raised my voice and yelled out, "Hey!" The second I did, the person immediately moved quickly toward the gate and slammed it shut behind him as he left. It was fast, like he'd already planned his exit. We didn't have anything back there yet besides a few basic gardening tools. It didn't feel like someone was stealing stuff, and I didn't go running outside because I didn't feel safe doing that. I checked the front windows, but I couldn't see anyone out there. Eventually, even though we were unsettled, we crawled back into bed and tried to sleep. A few nights later, it happened again. My fiancé woke me up the same way, and this time we both heard it clearly. Rustling outside, then a sound that made my stomach tighten. It sounded like someone working at something, like fiddling with hardware. The best way I can describe it is it reminded me of someone messing with a lock or latch. That subtle metallic shuffle you only notice when everything else is silent. I went back to the window, heart already thumping harder than it should have, and sure enough, there was someone in our backyard again. This time, my whole body went tense. I didn't just yell, "Hey!" I shouted that I was calling the police. The person moved out of the yard and slammed the gate the exact same way as before, but this time I saw enough. His posture, the shape of his face in the low light, for my brain to connect the dots. It looked like Gordon. I yelled his name, loud. He didn't answer. He didn't turn around. He just kept walking away like it meant nothing. That was the moment I stopped trying to rationalize it. I went downstairs and actually went outside. I checked the yard, then the sides of the house, forcing myself to breathe slow through my nose like that would keep me from doing something reckless. I told myself I had to deal with it right then, because if I didn't, I'd spend the rest of the night imagining him out there again. So I walked next door and knocked on Gordon's door. He answered almost immediately, which told me he'd been awake the whole time. He stood there with that same smile, and before I could even finish confronting him, he started laughing, like this was all just some misunderstanding he found funny. He admitted it was him in our yard. Then he offered this explanation that he was chasing off kids who always hopped fences in the neighborhood, and that he'd seen them jump from his backyard into ours. He acted like it was normal, like it happened constantly, and basically told me I'd get used to it. He kept smiling, but it didn't feel friendly anymore. The smile didn't match his eyes. I can't explain it perfectly, but it felt like there was something underneath it, something ugly. I remember looking at him and thinking I saw real hatred sitting back there, even while his mouth was doing the nice neighbor thing. I didn't argue, I didn't push it, I just told him I understood and went back home. But I didn't believe him for a second. The next day, he came over again. Like nothing happened, like we were buddies. He invited us to come over the following night, Friday, for Chinese food. We debated it, but we ended up saying yes. Part of it was hoping it would smooth things over, or at least make the situation less awkward. And part of it was that at that point, we were still clinging to the idea that we could handle this like adults and just be cordial neighbors. So Friday around 7 p.m., we went next door. The second we stepped inside, the atmosphere felt wrong. Not haunted or supernatural, just uncomfortable in a very human way. The air felt heavy, like you could tell you were walking into a bad mood. Gordon already seemed buzzed, and as the night went on, he kept drinking wine and getting more intoxicated. He told us he'd ordered a bunch of Chinese food, then made this weird comment about how he knew we'd love it. He laughed afterward like it was a harmless joke, but it didn't feel harmless. Through the evening, he kept making little digs, passive-aggressive comments, side remarks that were just sharp enough to sting while still letting him pretend he didn't mean it that way. When the food arrived and we offered to help set things up, he snapped at us. Not just a quick "no thanks." He almost yelled it like we'd offended him just by offering. Dinner felt tight and tense, like we were sitting at a table waiting for something to break. And then, as he kept drinking, he stopped pretending. The comments got ruder, more direct. He started saying things that made it obvious he didn't like that an Asian couple had moved into the neighborhood. At first, we tried to ignore it, hoping he'd run out of steam or realize how bad he sounded. Instead, he got louder, angrier, like he was working himself up as he talked. He started going on about how the town had always been white, like that was something sacred, like it was his job to defend it. The way he spoke made both of us feel genuinely unsafe sitting there in his house. Then, like he wanted to make sure we understood, he flat out admitted he really was the one coming into our backyard at night. No denial, no excuses, just this ugly casual confession. The worst part, the peak of the whole thing, was when he shouted at us that we weren't welcome there, that the neighborhood wasn't meant for people like us. We didn't argue. We didn't try to reason with him. We stood up and left. We walked back to our house as fast as we could, not even really talking until we were inside with the doors locked behind us. I remember the sound of the deadbolt clicking like it was the first full breath I'd taken all night. We didn't know what to do, so we did the only thing that made sense. We went to the other neighbors. We knocked on doors and asked people what they knew about Gordon. Some of them looked shocked when we told them what happened. Others acted like they weren't surprised at all. A few people told us Gordon was a drunk and that his wife had left him years ago. That didn't help. If anything, it made it worse, because now we weren't dealing with a misunderstanding. We were living next to a hostile drunk who already felt comfortable coming into our yard in the middle of the night. After that, we tried to avoid him completely. We stopped looking toward his house. We didn't go outside unless we had to. We kept curtains closed more than we ever wanted to. But you can't avoid your next-door neighbor forever, and every night felt tense, like he could be watching us again or sneaking onto our property. Then one night, a brick came through our downstairs window. The crash was violent enough to throw us straight out of sleep. Glass shattered across our living room like someone had dumped a box of crystals onto the floor. We both ran downstairs, and there it was, the brick lying in the middle of the room. No note, no message, just a brick, like the message was supposed to be obvious. We knew it was Gordon. There was no one else it could realistically be. But knowing and proving are two different things. We filed a police report. Officers came out and talked to him, and he denied everything. He played confused, acted like he had no idea what they were talking about. The police couldn't do much besides document it. We talked about putting up cameras. We talked about staying and fighting it out, refusing to be pushed around. But the truth is, we were scared. It wasn't just the fear, it was the exhaustion. Living like that, constantly tense, constantly listening for sounds outside, constantly wondering what the next escalation would be, it drains you fast. Both of us had the same feeling that if we stayed, something worse was coming. Less than 2 months after we moved in, we started packing up again. It's hard to explain what that feels like. We had just gotten the keys, just started building our life there, and now we were taping boxes shut like we were fleeing. Before we left, we filed another report and explained everything we could. The police said they'd keep an eye on things, but we didn't feel protected. Not really. We moved out of that house and out of that neighborhood as quickly as we could. We left behind what we thought would be our first chapter together, our first real home, and instead it became this thing we don't like talking about unless we have to. And I still think about it sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, because honestly, if we'd stayed there, I don't think it would have ended with a brick. I think eventually we would have ended up as a headline, and Gordon would have been the reason. All we could do was leave and try to move forward like it never happened, but it did. And the fact that someone like that can live right beside you, smiling through clenched teeth, is the part that still sticks with me. This happened a couple of years ago, around late 2021. My name is Noah, and my fiance, Gabby. She's my wife now, and I had just moved into a new house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was a nice two-story place, the kind of home you picture growing into, starting a family in, staying in for years. The street felt calm, and most of the neighbors seemed welcoming right away. The couple who lived to the right of us stood out the most. They were probably in their late 30s, maybe around there. The husband's name was Daniel, and his wife was Veronica. At first, they seemed genuinely kind. They came over, introduced themselves, and even baked us a red velvet cake as a welcome gift. It wasn't some store-bought thing either. It tasted homemade, and Gabby and I kept talking about it for days. We thanked them a bunch of times, and it felt like we got lucky with our neighbors. The first couple weeks in that neighborhood were exactly what we hoped for. Quiet, peaceful, boring in a good way. Then little things started happening next door that didn't fit the picture Daniel and Veronica had shown us. One night around 11 p.m., I heard shouting outside. Not the kind of sound you hear on TV or from someone's music. Real yelling, sharp and angry. I got out of bed and looked through our bedroom window, trying to see where it was coming from. It was clearly their house, like they were arguing, but the way the houses were positioned blocked my view. I couldn't actually see them, only hear it. After a minute, I saw Veronica come storming out. She moved fast, like she couldn't get away from the house quickly enough. She got into her car and drove off, and after that, everything went quiet again. I told Gabby what I'd heard, and we both tried to keep it simple in our heads. Couples fight sometimes. Maybe she just went for a drive to cool down. I'll admit, it bothered me a little because they seemed so sweet, like the last people you'd expect to be screaming at each other late at night. But still, it wasn't our business, and we didn't want to be the nosy new neighbors. Later that same week, Gabby and I came home from being out. When we got out of the car, we heard yelling again coming from inside Daniel and Veronica's house. Their main door was open, but the storm door was closed, and it carried the sound really clearly. You could tell it wasn't a normal disagreement. It had that harsh edge to it, like it had been going on for a while. We looked at each other, but we didn't do anything. We just walked inside our house and tried to ignore it. After that, I started noticing Veronica's car wasn't there as much. At first, it was just a couple days, and I assumed she was visiting family or on a trip. Daniel's car stayed parked like normal, and I'd still see him occasionally, walking to his mailbox, taking the trash out, stuff like that. But then a couple days turned into a week, then 2 weeks. Veronica's car never came back. Gabby noticed too. She said maybe they split up, which honestly made sense considering how much they'd been arguing. But the way it happened felt sudden. One day her car was there. The next day it was gone, and it stayed gone. And Daniel started acting strange. Every time we saw him outside, he avoided eye contact. He didn't wave like neighbors usually do. And on the rare occasions I tried to talk to him, he spoke quickly, like he was rushing through the conversation just to end it. He acted nervous, like he was always listening for something behind him or thinking about something else. After about 3 weeks of not seeing Veronica at all, curiosity got the best of me. I told Gabby I was thinking about checking in, just asking Daniel if everything was okay. She didn't like the idea. She kept saying it wasn't our place, and we should leave it alone. But I could tell she was wondering too. We both were. So one afternoon, I went over and rang the doorbell. I knew he was home because his car was in the driveway. Still, it took him almost 3 minutes to answer. That alone made me feel weird standing there, hearing nothing on the other side of the door, wondering if he was just staring through the peephole. When he finally opened it, he looked off. He was sweating like he'd just finished running. His hair looked damp around the edges, and he had this tight, forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. The whole thing gave me a heavy feeling in my chest, like I'd interrupted something. I asked him how things were going and mentioned I hadn't seen Veronica or her car in a while. He hesitated, just a little too long, like he was searching for the right answer. Then he said she'd gone out of state to stay with her mom for a bit because her mom was very sick and she was helping take care of her. If he'd said it normally, I might have believed him. But he sounded rehearsed, and his body language didn't match the story. He kept shifting his weight and blinking fast, like he was trying to keep control of his face. I didn't call him out. I didn't ask for details. I just nodded. Then I asked, kind of automatically, why he was sweating so much. He said he'd been working out upstairs. He said it fast, like he wanted to shut that question down immediately. And he kept talking quickly after that, like he was trying to steer the conversation back to normal. But then something happened that made my stomach drop so hard, I almost felt dizzy. From somewhere inside the house, I heard a scream. It wasn't faint. It wasn't distant. It was sharp and sudden. And to me, it sounded like a woman's voice. It had that unmistakable sound of fear in it, like someone yelling for help before they got cut off. I froze. I stared at Daniel and I asked him what that was. He answered too fast. He said something like he had a movie playing upstairs and he forgot to pause it. That explanation didn't even match what he'd just told me. A second ago, he claimed he was exercising upstairs. Now he was saying a movie was playing upstairs. It didn't make sense, and the way he said it, like he'd already decided that's what I was supposed to believe, made me feel cold all over. I didn't push it. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was disbelief. Maybe it was that instinct people get when something feels dangerous and your brain says, get away first, think later. So I just nodded again, told him I'd catch him another time, and walked back to my house. The second I got inside, I told Gabby everything. The sweating, the weird smile, the story about Veronica being gone, the scream. She didn't hesitate at all. She told me we needed to call the police. I called and asked to stay anonymous, even though I had a feeling Daniel would still figure out it was me. I told the dispatcher I'd heard something inside my neighbor's house, and I was worried someone might be in danger. I asked if they could do a welfare check. Not long after, an officer pulled up. About 10 minutes later, things escalated so fast it felt unreal. I heard sirens, then I looked outside and saw more vehicles turning onto the street. It wasn't just one police car anymore. It was several. And then an ambulance. Gabby and I rushed outside with that panicked, helpless energy you get when you know something terrible is happening, but you don't know what to do with your hands. Officers were everywhere, moving quickly, talking into radios surrounding Daniel's house. Then I saw Daniel being walked out in handcuffs. And right behind that, paramedics came out with a stretcher. Veronica was on it. She looked weak, barely moving, and the sight of her being rushed toward the ambulance is something I still can't fully put into words. It was like the neighborhood suddenly snapped into a different reality, one where the friendly couple next door had never really existed. Later, we found out what had been going on. Daniel and Veronica had been in an abusive relationship, and it had gotten far worse than anyone around them realized. Daniel had kept her locked in their basement for weeks. I didn't even know that house had a basement. He had been hurting her, assaulting her, doing things no one should ever do to another person, and to make it look like she wasn't there, he had sold her car. That explained why her car vanished overnight. That explained why Daniel was still home the whole time. That explained why he avoided us and acted nervous. And that scream I heard while I stood at his front door. When I heard that, it turned out she had made noise after he told her to be quiet while he answered. And because she made noise, he attacked her. We were told he stabbed her 5 times. Even writing that now makes my hands feel unsteady. At the time, hearing it felt like ice water poured straight into my chest. It connected all the pieces at once, and I had this horrible moment of realizing how close I'd been to something truly evil without knowing it. Veronica didn't survive. She passed away a couple hours later. As Daniel was being put into a police car, he looked at me, and he said something to the effect of, he knew I was the one who reported him and that I'd pay for it. If the situation hadn't been so horrifying, I might have tried to shrug it off because I knew he was going to prison. I knew he wouldn't be anywhere near me again, but the way he said it, it got under my skin. That whole thing changed how I see people. Because from the outside, Daniel looked like a normal guy. Friendly, polite, the kind of neighbor who bakes a cake and smiles. Veronica seemed kind too. They looked like a good couple. And all of that hid something so violent and sick behind closed doors that nobody around them saw it until it was too late. A couple nights after everything happened, I woke up in the middle of the night. The room was dark, the air felt still, and I saw the silhouette of someone standing there. At first, my half-asleep brain tried to make it into something harmless, a coat hanging weird, a shadow, my eyes adjusting, but as I came awake, that shape sharpened into a person. It was Daniel. My heart dropped so hard it felt like my body forgot how to move. In the dream, he was right there in our room, and he repeated the same threat he'd made when the police took him away. He was holding a knife. I remember trying to talk, trying to calm him down, trying to keep my voice steady like I could reason my way out of it. He didn't respond at all. I pressed myself back against the headboard, trapped, and the silence felt even louder than the screaming I'd heard weeks earlier. Then he lunged at me. I screamed, and I jolted awake for real. I was breathing hard like I'd been running. My shirt felt damp. Gabby was right beside me. Still there, still safe. She woke up and asked what was wrong, and I told her it was just a nightmare. She went back to sleep pretty quickly, but I couldn't. Because the dream didn't fade like most dreams do. It stayed clear, the room, the silhouette, the knife, the words he said. It stuck with me in a way that still makes my skin prickle when I think about it. The worst part was that in the dream, he used the same threat he'd made while being taken away in cuffs, like my mind had taken something real and replayed it in the most personal, terrifying way possible. I never told Gabby about that dream. I don't even know why. Maybe I didn't want her to feel more unsafe than she already did. Maybe I didn't want her to look at our bedroom at night and picture the same thing. Eventually, after we got married, we moved to another part of town. It's a good house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place we originally wanted, but that whole event left something behind in us. Knowing we lived right next to a man capable of doing that, smiling at us like a normal neighbor, still messes with my head. Because even now, years later, I'll sometimes wake up in the dark and stare at the corners of the room for a second too long, listening to the silence, remembering how close we were to not knowing the truth at all. My name is Devin, and this happened 2 years ago when I was 24 and renting half of a duplex in Queens, New York. It was one of those older houses that looked like it had been split straight down the middle. I had the left side, and some guy rented the right. I never met him. I don't even remember seeing him once. The landlord told me he mostly kept to himself and worked nights, so I didn't think much of it. My bedroom was upstairs, and one of my bedroom walls was the same shared wall as the neighbor's bedroom. If I put my ear against it, I could sometimes catch faint movement on the other side. Little shifts, light footsteps, the kind of normal living sounds you expect in the city. The wall was thin, but I told myself that was just New York. The first week I lived there, nothing felt off. I was working long hours, coming home worn out, or eating something quick, and going straight to bed. I was mostly just relieved to finally have my own place. Then one night, the weird stuff started. I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard what sounded like a man talking, but it didn't sound like a normal man's voice. It was higher, like someone forcing their voice into this fake pitch. The sound was faint, and it seemed like it was coming from the other room. But the wall was so thin, it felt like it was right next to me. I couldn't make out the words. It was more like muffled, high-pitched muttering. At first, I tried to explain it away. Maybe he was on a call. Maybe he had a show on. Maybe it was just audio bleeding through the wall. After a while, it stopped, and I eventually fell asleep. A few nights later, it came back, but louder. This time, there was no question it was a man talking. I rolled closer and pressed my ear lightly to the wall. It didn't sound like a phone conversation. There were no pauses like someone listening. It sounded like he was talking to himself, just rambling in that strange, forced voice. I didn't know if it was funny in a sad way or creepy in a way my body was already reacting to. I pulled the blanket over my head, like that would help because I had work early. And I needed sleep. I think that was the first night I really understood how much I hated living there alone. About 2 weeks after that, the knocking started. I was in bed again, not fully asleep, drifting in that half-awake state when I felt 2 quick taps on the wall right beside my head. It was so close I flinched hard like someone had reached out and touched me. I sat up, completely still, listening. A few seconds later, 2 more taps hit the exact same spot. That was when it stopped feeling like normal building noise. It was too clean, too deliberate. I rolled away from the wall and sat there with my heart pounding, waiting for more. But it went quiet again. My first thought was to knock back. Then a second thought kicked in, acknowledging it would probably encourage it. So I didn't. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it wasn't a big deal, that I'd overreacted because I was alone and tired and letting my mind run. But over the next week, the tapping kept happening. Sometimes it was soft, almost polite. Other times it was harder. It was always at night, and it was always when I was trying to sleep. One night, it went on long enough that I put headphones in and turned on a loud fan just to cover the sound. I remember lying there awake thinking about how thin the wall was, how close his room was, how close he was. It scared me in a way I couldn't fully explain, because technically, he wasn't doing anything to me. He could have been shifting in bed and tapping the wall by accident. He could have been leaning back in a chair and bumping it. I kept trying to be reasonable. But then came the night that changed everything. I'll never forget it. I was lying on my side facing the wall, eyes closed, not asleep yet. The room was dark except for a streetlight outside that spilled through my blinds in thin, pale stripes. I heard the knocking again. 3 slow taps this time, spaced out like someone was thinking between them. I kept my eyes shut and tried to stay calm, tried not to react. Then I heard that same high, forced voice through the wall again. It was still muffled, but not muffled enough. I could make out the words clearly this time. He asked what I was doing in there. My chest tightened so fast it felt like my lungs forgot how to work. I sat straight up, shaking so hard my whole body felt unstable. This wasn't an accidental bump anymore. He was speaking to me, directly, through the wall, like he knew exactly where my head was. I grabbed my phone and called my boyfriend immediately. I whispered because I didn't want the neighbor to hear my voice, but I was panicking. I told my boyfriend what had been happening, and I told him what the neighbor just said. He didn't hesitate. He told me he was coming over right away, and that he'd stay the night. I sat upright with the lights on until he got there. The rest of the night was quiet, and somehow that almost felt worse. It made me feel crazy, like the neighbor could tell my boyfriend was there. Like he'd been testing how alone I really was. For a few days after that, everything stayed quiet. No muttering, no tapping, nothing. I started wondering if maybe I'd misheard. Maybe he'd been talking on the phone and the sound just lined up in a way that felt personal. I didn't like that thought, but it was easier than believing what it seemed like. Then a few nights later, something happened that had me running out of the house like I was on fire. I was asleep that time, fully asleep. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but I woke up fast, like something snapped me out of it. I sat up, still trying to understand why I was suddenly alert. And then it started. Rapid tapping on the wall beside my head, like someone drumming their fingers right next to me. It wasn't 2 taps or 3. It was a quick, impatient pattern that made my skin crawl. Without thinking, I yelled back. I screamed for whoever it was to leave me alone. My whole body was shaking. My breathing went ragged. And I think yelling back gave me this rush of adrenaline, like my brain decided we were fighting now. I don't know what I expected after that. Maybe more knocking. Maybe silence. What I didn't expect, not in a million years, was to hear a voice from inside my room. In the dark, close enough that it felt like it was right beside me. A deeper voice said something like, "Go to sleep." It wasn't the high voice from the wall. This was lower, realer. And it didn't sound muffled. It sounded like it was standing in the room with me. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I launched off the bed screaming. The seconds after that are a blur. I remember sprinting through the hallway and down the stairs, but it's like my brain stopped recording details and switched to pure survival. I remember getting outside and running into the street, screaming for help over and over like I couldn't stop myself. I ran out barefoot. The sidewalk felt rough and freezing under my feet. I kept looking back, expecting to see someone coming after me. I didn't stop yelling until a man who lived a couple houses down came outside and just stared at me like he didn't know what he was looking at. I begged him to let me use his phone to call my boyfriend. He told me, based on what I sounded like, I needed to call the police, so I did. I stood on that man's sidewalk shaking and crying until the police arrived. When they got there, I told them everything. The talking through the wall, the knocking, the voice in my room. They asked if I was sure someone had been inside the duplex. I told them yes. I wasn't guessing. I wasn't unsure. I was positive. They drove me back to the duplex. My front door was still wide open the way I'd left it. 2 officers went inside while I stood outside with another one, hugging my arms to my chest and watching the doorway like something might walk out. They told me there were no signs of forced entry. Then they asked me if I remembered unlocking the door before I ran out. I didn't. I had no memory of touching the lock at all. I told them I didn't think I unlocked it, but I was so panicked that I couldn't swear to it. Everything happened too fast. They checked every room, every closet, under the bed, everywhere someone could hide. No one was there. They went to the neighbor's door and knocked too, but nobody answered. It looked like he wasn't home. No movement, no sound, nothing. Eventually, my boyfriend showed up and took me back to his place. I was still trembling hours later. I don't remember ever really sleeping again that night. In the morning, I called my landlord and told him everything. I asked who the neighbor was and whether there'd ever been problems or complaints about him. I told him I needed out of the lease immediately. At first, he pushed back. He started talking about notice and paperwork. I told him flat out I wasn't stepping foot in that duplex alone again, and he needed to work with me. It took a full day of calls back and forth before he finally agreed to let me break the lease. My boyfriend came with me every single time I went back to get my things. I refused to go alone, even in the daytime, even with the sun out and people around. During those days, we knocked on the neighbor's door more than once. No answer, not once. It was like nobody lived there. And yet there were signs that someone did. Packages left by the door, a car in the driveway. Just no human response, ever. After I got my stuff out, I moved back in with my parents for a while until I found another place. To this day, I still don't know what really happened in that duplex. I don't know if the neighbor was actually in my room that night, or if someone got in and got out without the police finding anything. Or if stress and fear somehow made me hear something that wasn't real. But that last explanation feels like the least believable one because I know what I heard and I know how close it was. Later, my landlord told me the tenant on the other side eventually moved out too, quietly, without telling anyone, without leaving an explanation. And that's where it ends. I still don't know who he really was, or what he was doing on the other side of that wall, or what was in my room that night.